want to have my traditional values. I want to be able to be a man. I want to be able to be masculine.
The voices of a new generation of conservatives.
They continue.
Literally, after the British show that came out about the young boy who falls down an Alright pipeline, falls down the manosphere pipeline, and unalives a girl, and the big show from the UK that's on Netflix right now. This is definitely a very topical, hot topic thing. I'm very interested to see how it looks in like Canada from like a Canadian perspective. Oh god, sorry, it's allergy season for me. Because when it comes to online stuff, I've definitely seen in my comments a lot of young men being more right wing, leaning more right. We've seen a lot of the stats over the years saying that young men are leaning more right wing. And I'm definitely curious to see like what the CBC and like mainstream media in Canada is looking at these people and like perceiving them as, and just the overall census that they're coming from with this.
Continue to vote Liberal. They continue to elect the socialist government that takes.
Okay, I mean, this is a Poilievre supporter for sure. For sure. This is socialist agenda. My ass.
Our money, makes our decisions for us, and ruins our country.
They're young, male, and frustrated.
Runaway taxation.
We're at a moment where men and women are moving in opposite directions.
A trend happening in some of the world's biggest democracies.
CBS News exit polling finds that the president-elect won white men under 30 by 7 percentage points.
In Germany.
The far-right AfD is the winner among young men, while a large number of young women chose the left party.
And in South Korea.
The frustration and anger of young men in this country, whether their opinion is right or wrong, is palpable.
In Canada, young men are now an integral part of Pierre Poilievre's base.
The extent to which the coalition has changed, I think, would be very shocking to people. It's very, very young.
Carney's not here for you. He's here to put Canada last.
Whoa. That's a Nazi flag right there.
He's here to put Canada last.
Canadian politics has changed a lot in the last 4 years. Like, check this out.
In the 2021 federal election, polls suggested that about the same number of young men and young women voted for the Conservatives. But today, things are way different. That's an 18-point gap. And pollster David Coletto says that gap is growing.
Have you ever seen support this high for the Conservatives among young men?
Not in my career. It is a new phenomenon that we are seeing such a divide that the demographic most likely today to say they're going to.
Because it is one of the flags that is marked by criminal groups in Canada as a Yahtzee flag. It's also one that historically used to be Canada's original flag, and the right likes to go back and take historical flags and bastardize them into Yahtzee flags. It's a really good question.
Going to vote Conservative in our polling.
And that flag was one of the many flags that were shown in the Freedom Convoy as well.
Men under the age of 30. That is a complete change to at least what I'm going to say the last few decades of Canadian politics.
In the last 3 federal elections, voters under 30 were more likely to vote for either the Liberals or the NDP than for the Conservatives, which kind of fits with the stereotype of young people being more progressive. But around the time Pierre Poilievre became the Conservative leader, Gen Z men shifted their support to the party. Jeannie Roth was Poilievre's director of communications on his leadership campaign.
What's changed is as young people are increasingly unhappy with where they sit in the world because they don't own homes, because they haven't been able to start families.
Yes, it is appropriation, but because it is being used by a right-wing, far-right organizations, it's just not a good thing to tote around anymore. And it is a good indicator. Like, it's just like a dog whistle. Like, people who know it and are able to kind of hear it and sniff it out, where unsuspecting people will look at it and be like, oh, that's just a flag. Or some people might even mistake it for the Ontario flag because it looks a lot like the Ontario flag.
Because they feel like when they take public transit, it's unsafe. Increasingly, those young voters are open to voting Conservative.
Boomers don't actually give a flying fudge about the future generations of Canada.
Oh my God, this fucking asshole. I hate this fucking skinhead.
Adam Beattie is a conservative influencer from the Vancouver area. He posts under the name Robin Skies on TikTok, where he has nearly 180,000 followers. Beattie voted for the NDP in his first federal election in 2015, but he eventually turned to the Conservatives because he felt they were more responsive to the anxieties of young men.
Why do you think conservatism now is appealing to young men in a way that maybe it hadn't before?
Because we're on the front line of all the crap that's going on.
Beattie says
My
he
God,
moved
they
out
got an
of
actual
downtown
interview with this
Vancouver because it
asshole.
was too expensive and because he was assaulted.
But having like a crazed person who's clearly high on something attack me, call the police and have the police look at me and say, there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, that's a radicalizing experience. And the only people who are capable of living life without having to face that, frankly, are an older generation who live in, protected neighborhoods who bought.
I'm shocked that he became conservative instead of turning around and going ACAB. The cops are doing shit. Also, on top of that, it's like, that he's the type to like demonize people who are going through mental health crises and who are suffering from addiction and who are suffering from homelessness, which can lead to addiction because people are going to self-medicate if they're homeless because they're not going to be able to afford prescription medication if they don't have a job, if they don't have an income, if they don't have a place to live. God, what an asshole. I hate him so much.
Bought into those neighborhoods when those neighborhoods were inexpensive and who continue to be shielded from the reality that's going on.
Are those sonogram pictures? Is this skinhead procreating? Ew. Who, what, and why would want to procreate with that? Ew. I guess there really is somebody out there for everybody.
That's being caused by these liberal policies and ideas.
We wanted to get a better understanding of when this gender gap began to emerge. So CBC News analyzed data from the Canadian Election Study, a comprehensive survey run by political scientists before and after elections.
The data suggests young men and women once had similar attitudes on questions about whether more should be done for women. But by 2015, their views began to diverge. The same goes for what should be done for racialized minorities. And recent polling by Abacus Data suggests that young men are more likely than young women to agree trans athletes should not be able to play on sports teams, and are more likely to believe there are no longer significant obstacles to women getting ahead. Coletto says young Canadians do agree on political and economic topics, like the importance of healthcare and childcare. It's on these cultural questions where young men lean conservative.
I think they do feel.
And by cultural questions, they mean wedge issues. They mean wedge issues. They mean culture war issues. They mean things that politicians use to distract all of us and to get people like reactionaries angered and have them focus on that to get votes rather than actually focusing on the real issues out there. Cost of living, the dwindling state of our healthcare system and actual important stuff like that. Like, it's easier to point the finger at immigrants or trans people than it is to hold politicians accountable. And that's what they do with these wedge issues.
Very anxious about the scale and the speed at which change is happening, particularly in societal kind of power structures, right? Like, it may be awkward to say, but I think they feel that their place in society is weakening and is maybe not as relevant as it used to be, right? That the historic advantage that particularly white men have had in our society is been challenged.
Alice Evans is studying how that rapid change has led to a global gender gap.
I think there is a risk that progressive activism has made some men feel alienated.
Evans says young people began polarizing along gender lines when they started spending less and less time socializing in person and more time on social media.
Globally, coupling is down, socializing is down, fertility is down. And that's a totally new dynamic whereby men and women are not necessarily understanding each other's perspectives. So people are spending much more time alone, by themselves.
It's always been like very astonishing to me that no matter what the issue is, if something's going on with men, it's always women's fault. Just always.
Single, and then in these online networks.
Jobs are being taken.
The backlash to progressive politics has been stoked by online influencers known as the manosphere.
How long before we have an actual sex robot that can talk to you like that?
Probably not long.
It's a corner of the internet where figures like Joe Rogan host hours-long podcasts that are popular with young men.
All this ridiculous woke shit with these rigid ideas of what you have to say and not say. It's like that. None of that is liberal. None of that is really like open-minded or progressive. It's all just it's a cult.
Men may gravitate to guys like Trump or Elon Musk who are saying, hey, the cavalry is here. We're going to cheer for the boys. We're going to champion men's rights. We're going to put men center stage for a change. Because that's an affirming message. So if men feel that they've always been left out and derided and neglected by these exclusionary progressive campaigns, then they may want their own heroes.
Fix my tire right on the screen.
Poilievre often speaks in a language that resonates with young men.
This insane, woke, DEI obsession is driving people away.
Or like when he sits with Jordan Peterson.
And calls Canadians stupid in the process.
Young people say, look, okay, I went through, I got an education, I work nonstop, and I have made the calculation that there is no mathematical path for me to own a house.
It's a strategy, I think, designed entirely to speak to that cohort, which is not a normal conservative audience. And so if Pierre Poilievre finds a way to get those young men out to vote, that's a constituency that could be decisive in him becoming prime minister.
Young men like Beattie.
The only reason why young people on the right are talking about all of this woke stuff is because people on the left are obsessed with it. They're constant, and it's like, I don't care. I want a job, I want a house, I want a family, I want...
Okay, then prove it. Prove it. Stop talking about South Asian people. Stop hyperfixating on all of the things that you are so incredibly above. Do better. Go to school. Get a fucking real job. Do something with your life. Ignore all of the people talking about the woke garbage. If it's just noise, ignore it. Why do you have to be all up in everybody's faces all the time? Like, apparently you have a little skinhead looking baby on the way. Why not focus on that instead of putting out so much hate? That you be constructive, maybe? Maybe do the conservative individualistic thing and take control of your own fucking life instead of making it everybody else's fucking problem. Ever thought about that? Poindexter? God. You can tell I just have animosity for this fucking creator.
Safety.
Since Trump's return to the White House, public opinion in Canada has been in a state of extreme flux. So far, young men have stood by the Conservatives, but boomers have shifted their support back to the Liberals.
It's certainly true for any political leader trying to hold together a broad voting coalition that there are always going to be concerns about appealing to one component of that voting coalition over another. You know, Poilievre is talking about institutions being broken. And so if you feel defensive of institutions, which many older voters do, it's harder for that to resonate.
Don't get me wrong, Donald Trump's comments about 51st state and, the tariffs, not good, okay? Huge L. But the idea that people, specifically of an older generation, might be willing to give a mandate to Mark Carney because essentially Donald Trump bruised their ego while their kids are struggling to pay rent and to buy a house and to afford the basics is frustrating.
I mean, somebody threatening to annex our country isn't just like a bruised ego thing. It's kind of like threatening our sovereignty, literally. And it's so fucking obnoxious. He is just so fucking obnoxious. Oh, we care about houses, we care about blah, 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 blah. Okay. Deal with your fucking premier then. Deal with your fucking municipal governments. They're the ones who have more in hand on what's going on with the housing prices and the affordability crisis than fucking Aaron O'Toole or not Aaron O'Toole, Pierre Poilievre or fucking Mark Carney do. Like, seriously. The provincial government and the municipal governments in Canada have a lot more to do with that than the fucking federal government does. Like, that's literally their fucking jobs. I wanted to also, un momento por favor, pull up something just to show people. So this is a chart of all the different like hate flags here in Canada. I'm gonna get a little bit smaller so people can see, and hate symbols. This is the old Australian flag. This is also another version of it. These are both hate flags. This is Diagolon's flag. They're a hate group in Canada. These are also hate flags up here as well. All hate symbols. Yeah, the Punisher skull symbol is also one. 1488, also a snazzy thing. And then this right here is the flag that guy had in the beginning of the video. Let's see if I can find it in the background here. This flag is this flag. And that is a Nazi flag. So that is why when I instantly saw this, I was like, oh, I know exactly what the fuck that is. I know exactly what that is. And that is not good. That is bad fucking news. Now, however, we're going to be moving on to do big crowd sizes translate to votes in federal election in regards to mostly Pierre Poilievre's crowd sizes for his little rallies.
I want to bring in CTV's political commentator and the former leader of the NDP, Tom Mulcair. Good morning to you, Tom. Nice to see you.
Good to be with you, Marcia.
All right, so obviously we're going to begin with the campaign, specifically, though, the polling, as we watch the Conservatives make some ground on the Liberals. What do you think is driving that?
Well, I think that there's still a lot of campaign left, and they've gone back to some of their more classic themes. They won a lot of the youth vote away from Trudeau, and they're trying to get back to that. Recently, here in the province where I live, in Quebec, Pierre Poilievre did a courageous turn. He went on a podcast with a younger guy who's a bit controversial, but nothing crazy. But it was a gutsy move because 150,000 people, and I would guess probably mostly young people, have seen the podcast since. So that's the type of thing that's going on. Poilievre has been putting a lot of effort into these massive rallies, but it's worth pointing out that those massive rallies, one, take a lot of the manpower away from doing things like organizing the advanced polls. Two, are mostly there to shore up their base. But at the same time, it shows that he's more than willing to come up with a crowd like that in a place like Edmonton in Alberta, where he's going to get 60% of the vote in the province. He'll get 60% of the vote in Saskatchewan. But that's a lot of that vote, for want of a better term, is wasted in the sense that the close ridings of the GTA, the Liberals should run the table. And they'll be winning those ridings by 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 votes mostly. But for them, it's still a riding. And that's the thing. The efficiency of the Liberal vote, combined with the fact that there's a greater potential universe of voters for the Liberals. In other words, there are a lot of NDPers, as they're dropping Singh, and we're seeing they're in single digits now, who are going over to the Liberals. Few of them would go over to the Conservatives. I can't think of any Greens who would go over to the Conservatives, and they seem to be dropping their party as well. So the Liberals are filling up their vote count with potential votes, because nobody's voted yet, but they're filling up their potential vote count with a lot of Green and NDP votes, and that's what's worrying, of course, the Conservatives. Has there been a slight narrowing? Potentially, but the most recent polling yesterday shows that the lead for the Liberals is still substantial, and when you factor in those two things, the efficiency of the Liberal vote and the fact that they've got a wider universe to pool from, I think it still makes it quite clearly the Liberals in the lead.
Let's talk a little bit more, Tom, about the crowds. And I can't believe we're talking about crowd size, but here we are, because it's clearly a thing for the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre, obviously proud. He's saying up to 15,000 people are coming out to the rallies. We've got a photo from one rally. This was in Brampton last night. And a bunch of people were there. Hopefully we can pop that up and show their shirts. And clearly they are questioning, these folks that were at the rally last night, the polls and the work that's being done by pollsters. And the shirts say, "Do you believe the polls?" So, Tom, do crowds translate into votes generally?
Generally not, but I can recall that in the 2015 campaign, because I was part of it, where Justin Trudeau held one very large rally, and I believe it might have been in Brampton, and he used that for a lot of his ads after that, because people weren't sure about Trudeau, they didn't know him very well, and he used that as a way to pop. What I believe is happening here with Poilievre is he wants to reassure his base that despite what they're reading...
Talking about crowd sizes sounds like Trump all over again. Like, I'll show you the size of mine if it matters so much. Yeah, seriously though. It's coming off very Trumpy, which again, Pierre Poilievre is trying to distance himself from very, very poorly.
In the polls, he's still very much in this race. That's his main argument for the last part of the campaign. And as I mentioned, nobody's voted yet, and there's still lots of campaigning left. Next week, we've got the major French and English debates happening one after the other on Wednesday and Thursday. And that'll be the final turning point, because right after that, you're into the advanced polls, and then people will actually be voting. So the Conservatives are going to be putting on a full court press. It's interesting, at the very beginning of the campaign, he seemed a bit rattled by the negative polls Poilievre did, but now he seems...
Advanced polls start on Friday, the 18th of April.
To have just said, look, I'm going in, all my energy, all my time, all my effort is going to go into this final stretch, and he's putting a lot into it. At the same time, the Liberals haven't shied away. They're very, look, I can tell you from having dealt with them many times as a politician, the Liberals are outstanding at the advanced polls. The Liberal voters tend to be a bit older. Getting them out for the advanced polls is quite easy if you can organize transport for them, and getting as many of those votes in the box as soon as you can. You know, if something really unbecoming happens in the last few days of the campaign, it won't rattle any of the votes that are already in the ballot box. And so this is the number one trick of the Liberals that I've learned over the years. They're excellent at getting that done.
So is there a trade-off, or how are resources better spent? Is it on a large rally, like we've seen Poilievre have almost every night that he's out campaigning, or door knocking, old-fashioned door knocking ads and phone calls, Tom?
Tough call. And I think that...
Personally, I believe, and it's going to seem a little hypocritical because I'm doing a lot of lives and like videos and stuff, but I honestly think going out in person, doing door knocking, doing canvassing, and actually talking to people in your community is probably one of the best ways to get people to go out and vote. I don't necessarily think that like a lot of the buzz online really translates to votes. This is definitely something that I've noticed, especially with the last provincial election here in Ontario, and with the last election prior to that, even though, or like federal one, I mean, even though the Liberals did win, it wasn't by a huge margin at all.
That in terms of reassuring his base, Poilievre had to do it. He had to organize a couple of these massive rallies to say, don't worry about anything anybody else is telling you. We're still very much in this race. But now they've got to hunker down. I mean, they should not be spending any volunteer time organizing, because to get that many people out, believe me, for every person who shows up, you've made 10 phone calls and you've pushed people and you've offered to drive them and you've organized that whole thing. So now it's time for them to just say, okay, the finish line is now within reach. We've passed the halfway mark of the campaign. The debates are next week. Let's try to make the best of this. And that's the run that they're into. With regard to the pollsters, I mean, you get so frustrated when you're in politics. And I've felt that frustration and I can understand it. But in my experience, the pollsters, generally speaking, you can see one that might pull a little bit towards the Conservatives and another one that tends to consistently have a point or two more for the Libs, and that's part of life. But I remember talking with Jean-Marc Léger, who, very much like Nick Nanos, who works with us at CTV, is somebody who understands this stuff deeply. And he shared a thought with me in the last campaign that I'll mention to you. I thought that the NDP was doing really well in the 21 campaign in the GTA. I was looking at the numbers, 23%, 24%, 25%. And I said to Jean-Marc, because we worked together, we were in studio together that day, I said, Jean-Marc, the NDP is going to win a bunch of seats in the GTA in this election. And he just looked up at me. He says, they're not going to win any seats. I said, look at the numbers, 23, 24%. And, with the vote split, they're going to win a bunch. He goes, no. He says, most of that, he says, I've polled. He says, most of that is young people and they're not going to vote. So when you know that 50, 60% and up, sometimes more than 60% of young people don't even bother voting, he was making an analysis based on a deeper understanding. So it can be frustrating when you're in politics. You're hearing good things from everybody on your campaign. You think it's going well, and a pollster tends to put a bit of a damper on it. But overall, the pollsters, in my experience, are doing a professional job, and they're helping people understand the race. And they'll say that.
And there are many different reasons for why young people don't like to go out and vote. Some of it is even a liking not to go out and vote. Some of it is they have to work. And even though we are allowed to say, hey, I need an hour or two to go vote, like legally you're allowed to go do that in Canada. A lot of people, because there's a lot of job insecurity out there, and a lot of people have jobs where they can just go out for lunch for an hour. They only get like a 15 or a half hour long lunch, if even at all, even though it's illegal, if even at all. A lot of people aren't able to leave work. A lot of people, especially young people, don't have cars. They don't have a easy transportation to get to a lot of poll stations. Very rarely are poll stations near bus routes. And even if they are, again, some people just can't get out. Other people, again, they just feel disillusioned. They have voter apathy. And those are all a lot of big factors into why younger people are more likely not to vote. And it's definitely something that, like, I want to try to counteract. I want to try to work against. I want to try to push back on. But it's really hard, especially in a time and place like this where, we're post-COVID and a lot of people just want to put their fingers in their ears and not have to think about politics anymore. It's going to get harder and harder and harder to get younger people out there. Now, I am going to let this play into the next video. The next video is Poilievre limits media access, only allows handpicked reporters questions. While I run to the ladies' room.
They're not influencing votes, but between you and me and the gatepost, pollsters influence votes. I mean, their polls have a determining influence on how people feel about the candidates, how they feel about the campaign, and how they feel about their own vote.
Well, I hate to end this conversation with a cliche, but I must. Time will tell. We'll find out in a couple weeks.
Exactly.
Tom Mulcair, good to have you with us this morning. You take care.
All the best. You too.
We'll now take questions from the floor.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speaks to media nearly every day.
Elaine Delamattia, Sioux Star.
But unlike other party leaders, he only takes 4 questions with no follow-ups, and party staff decide which reporters get to ask.
Is that like not getting a security clearance?
That boiled over in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, when a reporter not handpicked by the party tried to ask a question.
Sorry, there's just a protester here. Go ahead.
It's a reporter trying to ask you a legitimate question.
If the Liberals stay in power.
At campaign events, journalists are kept at a distance, often behind barriers.
Thank you. Next question.
All part of the party's iron grip on message control. Staffers have tried to block access to journalists trying to speak to reporters and even local candidates.
There's a picture of you going around on social media wearing a Make America Great hat.
This event isn't open for questions. It's just for coverage, okay?
We're on a wharf in Petty
Yeah, it's a public place.
The Liberals, New Democrats, and Bloc Québécois all have reporters traveling with their campaigns at their news organization's expense. And those reporters choose among themselves who will get to ask questions. The Conservatives used to do that too, until this year. A campaign source says it's about minimizing risk.
I do think that a strategy to limit access to Mr. Poilievre is a safe one.
This pollster says the Conservative strategy has pros and cons.
It's one where you think you are well ahead. All you need to do is control as much as you can and just get to the finish line because you're so far ahead in that race. As we've seen in basically 3 months, that strategy doesn't seem to be working because the entire landscape has changed.
The Conservatives said they'd run one of the most accessible and transparent campaigns in recent history. But so far, Liberal leader Mark Carney has taken twice as many questions from reporters.
Kate, Pierre Poilievre hasn't shown much hesitation clashing with the media while he was Conservative leader, sometimes dressing them down. Is that still a factor on this campaign trail?
Well, he smiled more. He occasionally engages with reporters in a way he wasn't before, but off camera, the tone hasn't shifted. Often political staff will try to suss out what reporters want to ask. They put strict controls on when journalists can enter and leave venues where we can set up cameras, all parts of this effort to control the daily message.
Kate McKenna in Ottawa, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ron is running for us in Oakville, but he's Oakville East, but he is a long-time police.
So I want to go back to that video because it was only like a couple minutes long.
We'll now take questions.
So, okay, I love how it's opening with just like Pierre Poilievre doing the biggest fucking ever.
We'll now take questions from the
CBC do be doing him fucking dirty sometimes. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about here, and I did let this play all the way through, but what I wanted to talk about here was one, I've seen the video, the original video where the reporter was trying to question Pierre Poilievre, but wasn't allowed to, and was, berated by Pierre Poilievre for trying to do their job as a reporter. Poilievre here is definitely, failing to distance himself from Trump in allegations of being Trump-like by, demonizing the media and, attacking the CBC and, just challenging media as a whole.
the floor.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speaks to media nearly every day.
Elaine Delamattia, Sioux Star.
But unlike other party leaders, he only takes 4 questions with no follow-ups, and party staff decide which reporters get to ask.
Is that like not getting a security?
It's interesting to see it from this angle where you can see her trying her best to get out there and, get some fucking answers from him.
That boiled over in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, when a reporter not handpicked by the party tried to ask a question.
Sorry, there's just a protester here. Go ahead.
And calling her a protester too is absolutely ridiculous because she's not a protester. She is a member of the press. She is a reporter.
It's a reporter trying to ask you a legitimate question.
Go Queen.
If the Liberals stay in power.
At campaign,
and like the CBC broadcaster says, Poilievre's team has had a lot of issues with reporters. Here coming up is going to be a clip of a reporter being pushed by one of Poilievre's team.
Staffers have tried to block access to journalists trying to speak to reporters and even local candidates.
Actually getting fucking physical with people. This is something that isn't really normal for Canadian politicians, really. Being this hostile to the news is just not normal for Canada really at all. And it's just, something that again goes to show, for me at least, that Poilievre is willing to block reporters and is willing to suppress media and only favor media that is favorable to him because he is afraid of being challenged. The next video that did start playing while I was gone, a longtime police officer on liberal catch and release laws. This is more of Poilievre's Reagan-esque, Margaret Thatcher-esque, Harper-esque war on crime. Bullshit.
Ron is running for us in Oakville, but he's Oakville East, but he is a longtime police officer, including for Peel. Yes, sir. And tell me what you've seen from catch and release under Liberal Bill C-75.
If I were to explain to you and have you live the life of an average police officer just over the last...
ACAB. This is an ACAB stream. BT dubs.
...last 6 years, ever since Bill C-75 came in 2019, it would keep you up for decades. And it's terrible. We have families who have lost their loved ones, their kids in their own household from fentanyl overdoses, and police officers and first responders have to tell the family. We have repeat violent offenders committing murders, carjackings, home invasions, and when we catch them, we have to tell these innocent Canadian victims, good people with their family, their loved ones in their house, that the person who did this was on bail. And we're trying everything we can do to keep this person in custody. But the
ACAB. ACAB. ACAB.
This Liberal government has always led them out. That heartbreak was the reason why I got involved with Pierre Poilievre. I had been lobbying to government as an independent police officer to say, please bring back common sense. And out of all of the politicians I had met, years ago I'd met with Pierre Poilievre. He was the only politician to ever ask me, how do we fix it?
And Ron, I'm happy to say that we will fix it. A Canada First Conservative government will repeal catch and release bail and end C-75.
Oh my God. Just more propaganda bull from Pierre Poilievre, the tiny little millhouse looking man he is.